Now, of course, in this past year, since we've had our last event, very dramatic, perhaps, developments have happened. At the global scale, we've had the Trump administration come to power, which, of course, has huge implications for the Russia-Ukraine war. We're now talking about and discussing the US retrenchment from Europe, not just Ukraine, but also from general European security. We are talking about a massive boost of security anxiety, but also security policy and defense spending across Europe. We are, looking at a context in which the major support for the Ukraine in the war comes from Europe and their allies, and not so much from the United States as it used to. And of course, there have also been a few talks about the peace prospects and some peace proposals that have been circulating around, but nothing that have been finalized yet. So I think we do have sufficient ground and more to discuss today. So I'm going to keep it at that, and I would like to give the floor to Mr. Consul General Roman Nedilskyi for his opening remarks. Thank you and welcome.
Dear colleagues, dear representatives of academia, dear Mrs. Aydın-Düzgit, distinguished panelists, Mr. Stefano, Braghiroli, Mr. Hennadiy Maksak, he is going to be in our Zoom in 5 minutes. Dear Mr. Salih, Bıçakcı, before my introductory intervention, I would like to express my deepest condolences to Turkish people because today we got news about the tragedy happened with F-16 combat aircraft this morning, which was there was an accident close to Balıkesir. Unfortunately, the pilot didn't survive at that tragedy. He unfortunately lost his life. So, dear friends, please accept our deepest condolences. Dear guests, in the framework of marking of the fourth anniversary of the full-scale aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, today we are holding a joint discussion panel with the Istanbul Policy Center of Sabancı University. The fourth anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, regional security in the context of global changes. In fact, the war began in 2014 with the occupation of Crimea and part of the Ukrainian Donbass. Unfortunately, the international community, as we see, did not pay enough attention to the occupation of Crimea. Unfortunately, this war resulted in This was resulted in the largest armed conflict in Europe since the end of World War II, thousands of drones and missiles that attack the civilian population of Ukraine every day, complete disregard for international law by the aggressor, the Kremlin's reluctance to find a peaceful solution to the war, millions of Ukrainians who flee the country at the first months of the invasion. Our task today is to find effective mechanism that will force the aggressor to sit down at the negotiating table. We also have a joint task to build a new system of regional security right now. Today we have the opportunity to combine diplomatic experience with the ideas and achievements of the academic and expert society. I highly appreciate you for this opportunity. We thank all our speakers, prominent experts and true specialists in the field of international relations, for their attendance at today's discussion. Finally, I thank you, dear Mrs. Aydın-Düzgit, and your brilliant team for organizing this event. I call on all participants to an active and fruitful discussion. After all, today, Ukraine is fighting not only for its freedom. We are fighting for the values of democracy, the stability of Europe, the stability of the Black Sea region, for the future in which force has no right to destroy law. I am confident that by joint efforts we will be able to strengthen the Black Sea region and build security that will work for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Senem Hoca, Mr. Consul General. I think everyone can hear me okay, so, or I can project more. This morning we have a very good panel discussions to discuss the 4th anniversary of the invasion, which is of course the full-scale invasion. If we go back to the invasion of Ukraine, we're now entering the 13th year. This morning we have our one speaker in person. Unfortunately, where there is a small change to the program, Serhat Hoca seems to have some of the illnesses going around Istanbul this time of year. So we have Salih Bıçakcı, a professor of international relations in Nişantası University. And we have 2 online speakers joining us today. The first is Stefano Braghiroli, who's an associate professor of European studies at the University of Tartu in Estonia, joining us this morning. And then we also have our second speaker, Mr. Hennadiy Maksak, the executive director of Ukrainian Prism, which is the foreign policy think tank of Ukraine. And he will be joining us, I think maybe I see an admit button soon, but of course, with the power situation in Kiev these days, hopefully we can have him join us. Yes, oh, perfect. Good morning, Mr. Maksak, how are you? Can you hear us?
Yes, I hear.
Perfect, okay. Great. We are just about to start the discussion. We finished the opening remarks. Given the power situation in Kiev, shall we start with you, just in case we might lose you?
Yeah, sorry for my delay, but yeah, the situation is quite tense, and to find stable connection is still a big challenge for all of us. But I'm with you, and I'm happy to join your discussion. And thank you so much for inviting me and for having this event, which is marks the first or the start of the 5th year of the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, full scale. But we all know it's not from 2022, but from 2014. So I'll be happy to join your discussion.
Thank you. So, would you like to begin our discussion with your opening remarks, just since of the power situation? If we lose you at any point, of course, please join us again. So we hope to detain you as long as we can. So.
I would think you have to start communication with you on this issue, because for us it's quite a painful date, and basically a lot of flashbacks back in 2022. We all met the first day of full-scale aggression, how we tried to mobilize ourselves. But let me start from the day prior to 21st of February. On 23rd of February, in our office in Kiev, we had a big group of international experts. And the question was obvious at the time, what is the likelihood of full-scale aggression? And I would say that I did my best to talk and to give the reasons and arguments why this full-scale was not rational. I presented arguments both from the side of Ukrainian military capabilities, that it's not so easy to take Kyiv in 3 days or in 3 weeks, but then also I tried to present our partners' position about sanctions, about global impact on the aggressor. But we were all satisfied at that moment. So basically, I managed to persuade that there would be no full-scale aggression. And overnight, there was a phone call from my mom, who lives in the city near the border with Belarus and Russia. And she was saying, we are under bombardment. And basically, it was a real reality check for all of us. because even if you have expertise and you base yourself on rules-based approach, it's nothing close to the reality when you have situation when you fight with aggressor who is not trying to align with any kind of norms and institutions. But then another point, which is I think quite important for our discussion and for understand the situation, that in 3 or 4 days of full aggression, Putin made televised address to Ukrainian army, and he was saying that do not listen to Ukrainian authorities, just come to our negotiation table and we will make a deal. And then I understood that, my gosh, he understood nothing about Ukraine. He tried to appeal to the most patriotic part of our society. And basically, that gave us strength and understanding that there is no big grand strategy. It was only showing off of Putin, and we are capable of standing to this aggression. And now, 4 years, we're standing to this aggression, and some preliminary conclusions are there. The first one, we are living in a time when there is no possibility to stand by your own. We have to acknowledge situations that only due to the partnership with our partners in the European Union, United States, Turkey, we are capable to just resist and to give understanding that it doesn't matter what the size of your country is when you have strong partnership and understand that you stand for right cause. Another point, which I think is very important for all of us to understand, that now the world is fragmented. We have the camp who is standing fighting for truth, for sovereignty, but on the other hand, we have other camp who is fighting for just keeping chaos in the world. We're talking not only about Russia, we're talking about North Korea, we're talking about Iran, and basically about China, who is also keeping this fire open. And so I think this is something we have to acknowledge. And when it comes to the region that we all cherish, Black Sea region, this is something that we have to bear in mind all the time. Regional ownership, which is the concept of Turkey, I think is something which is very important, that all littoral states have to take care of this region, of this basin. But at the same time, I think it's also very important for all of us to understand that Russia is also a littoral state. And if we have no common ground, we have to do utmost to create a system which deters Russia from further aggression, not only for Ukraine, but for other states within the region, because it's very important to understand for aggressor that there is strength on the other side. From our experience of 12 years plus fighting with Russia, only strength is something that Russia understands. So to be capable to be prosperous in this region, we have to be strong, and this strength is something we can negotiate and we can cooperate and develop together jointly with the European Union, with Turkey, with NATO as a structure. And I think that there are already signs which flag about the new initiatives, new approach within the bigger alliances for the region, and I think it's a good news for us. When it comes to Black Sea and Ukraine, at this moment we can separate 3 stages, which go in not only one by one, but maybe in some parts they also can coincide. But the first one, how to bring ceasefire, if not to all dimensions, but for maritime dimension. And here I think that it is very important to have partnerships with Turkey, with our European partners, and to create a system which is capable to monitor and to verify ceasefire, and if anything, to use capabilities just to instate back this ceasefire. So I think this is something which is might be attributed as the phase number 1 in our cooperation for the region. Point number 2 is how to create a stable agreement and how to rebuild Ukraine. And when I'm trying to relate to recovery of Ukraine, it is also very important for Ukraine to recover our port infrastructure. You will know that in our cooperation with Turkey, we were capable of sustaining food security worldwide. And I think this is something which is interesting for Kiev, for Ankara, but also for European Union to be partnering in that. And I think that this transport route, this freedom of navigation is something which is very important for us, but also to rebuild our port infrastructure. Only in 2022, let me just throw a figure on the table, that there were around 300 objects of port infrastructure destroyed by Russia in Ukraine, and 126 people were killed only in 2025 connected to this area. So it's tremendous losses for Ukraine. Here we see partnerships with our friends from the region, and I think that Turkey might be also very interested in this approach. So I think this is something which might be of interest. And third one, I think, is maybe a longer perspective for us, but still we have to be joined on our efforts in the region, how to create long-term architecture for security and prosperity in the region. And here I would reiterate the main approach should be to unite all the forces, to unite all the possibilities of the little states which are capable to create conducive environment and try to deter and to decrease as far as possible the leverage and aggressive possibilities of Russia in the region. So these three stages are very important for all of us to keep in mind. I think on many of them we cooperate in the region. We are quite aware of the fact how difficult it is, and you know that now the negotiations on peace process or negotiations on some environments of peace process are unfolding in different places over the world, and it's difficult. But we also take into account the Turkey's position and basically the commitment to be one of the guarantors of freedom of navigation in Black Sea. So I think this is something which is important. Our resistance is, I think, something that we understand it's our survival at the same time. So 4 years of full-scale aggression just indicates that Putin doesn't want to stop. There is no indication. And in the long term, his idea is to cut Ukraine from Black Sea, from maritime domain. And this is something we know from our intelligence community. So I think this is why to unite all the forces of littoral states, all the forces of partners in Black Sea is something which makes an impact on aggressor and also gives us possibility to just develop new projects and new ideas in the region. Let me stop here, not to have a monologue, but maybe to engage in discussion. I hope this introduction was quite clear for our priorities in the region of our priorities in Black Sea Basin.
Thank you, Mr. Maksak. It's very valuable to have your opinions from Kiev. So thank you for joining us with your little bit of electricity for today. So then we have the view from Kiev at this point. Let's move maybe to Stefano, who's in Estonia. So, I mean, still, of course, quite far from us now, but next to Ukraine, moving out how everything is looking in the Baltic region, Turkey, EU, Ukraine, how you can see everything from there.
Yes, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. Yes?
Yeah.
So, first of all, thanks a lot to Consulate General and for the Istanbul Policy Center for this invitation. I would like to start with a bit of context, as you mentioned. I mean, 24th of February means a lot for Estonia. Traditionally, 24th of February is Estonia's Independence Day. We celebrated yesterday, along with remembering the start of the full-scale invasion. So on 24th of February 2022, Estonians went to sleep the night before thinking that they would celebrate Estonia's independence. They woke up looking at the full-scale invasion of a neighbor and the country they feel very close. In my open remarks, I will basically touch upon 3 points. The context of the war, where it started, what's the origin, and how basically where we are now, the European context, and overall the global order or disorder where we are basically now. So if I start with the full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the war on Ukraine that Russia is conducting, I would start with 1 point of clarification of context. This is not about NATO, this is not about minorities, it's not even about territory. It's about Ukraine's sovereignty. It's about Ukraine's choice to be a country and make its own decisions. And the idea that Russia has is that either Kiev is a subdued satellite, basically a servant, or it's an enemy. A third option does not exist. And in that sense, this does not apply only to Kiev and to Ukraine, but basically applies to all the space that Russia sees as its spheres of influence, what is often called, unfortunately, former Soviet space. And we know here in Estonia that certainly we are in that box. Now, the war itself is not going well for Russia, despite the superpower claims and the superpower rhetoric, or what we hear from Russian TV. In more than a year, there's been no strategic gains. That's quite visible. Huge losses. The prices of sanctions, despite what Russia says, are there and hurt. And the regime appears weaker than certainly it was years ago. The economy is disrupted. Still, Russia, despite obviously attempts to reintegrate, is cut out from at least the West. There are growing costs for civilians that face basically the price of a full engaged war economy. But let's also look at the other side of the coin. Ukraine is bravely holding ground. Ukraine is fighting, I would say, heroically, but resilience is not forever. And at the same time, we cannot expect that, a nation carries that forever in a context in which attrition takes place. Without a solid lifeline and consistency from the allies, which at the moment doesn't seem to be there 100%, things will become and might become more complicated, and Putin actually bets on this, bets on the long term. Maybe last point concerning the war. Russia, despite the fact that it's weaker than it looks, remains a key fundamental danger. Not only for Ukraine, it remains a key fundamental danger for Europe, and I would say for the region, including the Black Sea region and including Turkey. If Russia succeeds in its goals, and that's the first reason why this remains a danger, if Russia succeeds in its goal, the war will certainly continue because Russia cannot stop at this point because of the type of economy that it has engaged and because of the huge mobilized amount of soldiers that it has. And Ukraine, or the parts of Ukraine that would take over, would become a powerhouse to basically push ahead this war. The second one is that the more scary and the more divided we are and the more vulnerable we look to Russia. Russia can only win a war with the West, NATO, if the West does not fight, if the West is scared. And this is what Russia bets on. And of course, Russia tries to play the Trojan horse role with our public opinions. That was my first point on the war. Then again, on Europe. For Europe, this war and the way in which this war ends is absolutely existential. The US administration under President Trump has tried to make peace, but I have to say in very blunt terms, so far it has been unable to do that, and I believe that, again, this trend might continue. The reason, I would say, are two. First, limited understanding of the war, the roots of the war and the context from the US administration. And the second one is that if all the burden is put on the victim and no real burden is put on the aggressor, it becomes complicated to put Russia on a table with real and serious intention to discuss. Rationally speaking, at the moment, Russia has no real reasons to engage in a credible negotiation with Ukraine. There is no punishment at the moment for Russia strong enough to push it in that direction. I would say that Europe is in a better position to do that. I would argue that using, let's say, a language quite quite known in the United States. Europe has more cards than we might think. As it was just mentioned, Ukraine is far less dependent on other allies at the moment. European Union and European countries are paying for almost all the support for Ukraine. Even part of the intelligence, which at the moment is around more than 50%, is provided by European countries. Now, this means that on the one hand, Ukraine has more freedom of maneuver in the context of negotiations, which appear skewed to, let's say, push for its own position, and also Europe has more freedom of maneuver. So how could Europe, let's say, try to make peace more close and more real? Well, I think that, again, it looks quite dystopic, the fact that in the light of what I just mentioned, Europe has no seat on the table. And I also think that in a way, that is a reality we need to deal with. So how to do that? Well, first of all, I don't think that we need any direct engagement with Russia at this stage, as European Union and as Europe. What we need, on the other hand, is to communicate very clearly to Russia and to the United States what our priorities are, what our red lines are, and how do we support Ukraine in coordination with Ukraine. The third point about this is to make Russia pay the most and to support Ukraine as much as possible. And when it comes again to proposals that are put forward that are, let's say, absolutely unacceptable to us, I would say that the best way to go is simply to come up with our counterpoints rather than try to amend the points which at the same time might have a problematic starting point from the beginning. Now, I'm not unaware of the limits that the European Union is facing at the moment, European countries are facing at the moment. We have seen, I would say, a tragic game played by a new member state yesterday in Brussels. And again, we can discuss after how to try to overcome that and how to try to overcome these limits. Maybe the last point, it's about the global scale. And again, what appears to be, we have heard it from Davos to Munich, the end of the post-World War II, or at least of the post-Cold War global order. And this end basically means increasingly one thing, what basically Hennadiy was warning us about. So the idea that increasingly might makes right. And that is something that puts all of us in a much more uncomfortable position. It's a much more dangerous world from everyone, from Kiev to the Black Sea, passing through mainland Europe. And as the Prime Minister of Belgium, quoting in fact Antonio Gramsci in Davos put it, if the old is dying and the new is not yet born, you live in a time of monsters. And the problem is, how do we deal with these times of monsters, and how will this time of monsters look like? Well, I mean, what might increasingly appear on I would say, fairly cloudy map is the risk of a tripartite imperial spheres of influences, which in a way has also been emerging. If we have been, for example, familiarizing with the new US security strategy and so on and so forth. Well, how it works, I think it's quite easy to see that. Again, Russia devastates Ukraine, fairly little happens from the West, no real reaction from Washington. Trump strikes Venezuela, Russia and China do fairly little. China might escalate threats against Taiwan, and basically the United States and the West do little. This, of course, brings a lot of uncertainty in the context of our region and your region, the Black Sea, and so on and so forth. So how do we deal with that? I think that, again, there are two main factors. In these times of vulnerability, world democracies, but also world countries that feel that international law is their best protector, is their shield, are brought together close to each other. There is a sort of rally around the flag effect. And in that sense, I believe that Europe, the European Union, together with its partners, Turkey, Ukraine, Canada, Australia, Japan, and UK, can become somehow a lighthouse that supports this idea of international law, which is not a thing of the past. The second thing that I believe Europe should do urgently is more freely, more openly, and more equally engaging with the global South. Following what President Stubb of Finland has called values-based realism. So the idea that, again, this urgency, this collapsing world order brings automatically ourselves close to each other because we feel vulnerable in a world in which only big powers might end up setting the agenda. And an important thing where both Ukraine can play a fundamental role here, as much as the Baltic states, is exposing Russia's imperialism to the global South. In some parts of the global South, there is still this myth that comes from Soviet times that Russia is an anti-colonial power. Russia is not. Russia is an imperialist country. The country where I am based, as much as Ukraine and as much other countries in the region, have been victims of that imperialism even before the Soviet Union emerged. That dates back from the Russian Empire and so on and so forth. And unlike other imperialist or former imperial powers, Russia has gone through none of this memory and historical redefinition of their past. There has been absolutely no discussion of their imperial past, and that's why nowadays Russian imperialism is more dangerous than ever. I think I will stop here. Thank you.
Great, thank you for leaving us on. So you can hear. Thank you for leaving us on the global note there with the global South and Russia's involvement there. And I'm sure in the Q&A we'll go back to the cards that Europe has in its hand to negotiate with Russia, Ukraine. So I'm curious about that. Now we'll turn to our in-person participant, Salih Bıçakcı. You can have the floor, and please, if you could use the microphone just so that our online speakers can hear you a little better.
Okay. I think it's a good point to start with Gramsci, the transition. We understand the transition a little bit problematic because the two determinants of the security is economics and technology. And both of them are working, creating the context of security. And on the one hand, technology is improving incrementally, and it is building up an enormous way, and we are tested with semiconductors, AI, and all different technologies, which now we have even understand them as a disruptive. On the other hand, we also have economics. Once, I mean, if you take the 2 decades ago, we have been talking about globalization, and we are even in Munich, in Bavaria, we are asking the companies to expand their supply line. By this way, they have a car produced by different sources, and people are going to be built, it's cheap, and it's more profitable. Now, we are returning into a different, a transactional economic order, which is a little bit changing, right? Multilateralism is an issue, but the minilateralism becomes an issue. So these economic changes already has changing the global order. And we are not reading this perspective, I assume, because liberalism or neoliberal approach now returning and coming to end. When in the neoliberal age, has been asked that now if you think about a scale and the pendulum, which on the one hand is a liberty, the other hand is a security, we have been now in the days that we have hard to find the optimum point between liberty and security. And that is the harsh point for us. And the actors, we try to understand the actors, what they are doing. Some actors are so consistent. I mean, if you look at Russia, you will see that in 2007, I don't know if you recall it, Estonia, Tallinn remind me the issue that they have an attack of the Russians to Estonia. And if you can remember, Estonia is the first country in the world who make the digital elections, and they have been under attack at least 10 days by the Russians, just because moving an old Soviet sculpture from the center of city to an old military cemetery. That is not the first thing. And the second thing, they continued, the Russians are so consistent asking and building a new order. I mean, I'm not sure that we all are reading the glasnost and perestroika in the right way, because it is a change of it, and neo-Tsarism of Russia is still under the vent of the system, and they are continuously doing it. Estonia is a one order, they continued with 2014. I mean, you might remember from the NotPetya attacks to the Ukrainian critical infrastructure, which is still a first sound of it. And the Crimea issue is the one they created a referendum, and everyone said, oh, referendum, and everyone knows this is not a referendum. They have persistently followed their goal, what they want to do. They give a message. Now, in that order, the leading country, I mean, the polarity is mostly uni, and United States is leading and asking people to expand its capacity. But the economics now has tremendously changed, and the order of the Europe becomes an issue. So when I say this, there is what I see the Ukrainian issue is a little bit problematic: fear, fatigue, and economic anxiety of the Europe. It is not only the Ukraine. And I'm going to understand this from different perspective to give you an approach. I understand that the goal is not Ukraine. I mean, it might be the victory of Ukraine, it might be the defeat of Ukraine, but the minor and major goal of Russia is the Europe, because Europe is forming a new order, and Europe, which has changed its military system. In the 2 decades ago, if you talk, I now remember from the Holland, in NATO members, they are talking about the small units and quick deployment and that kind of things because the military changed. But now we are thinking about, could we find some new military support recruitment from this population? And it's a really difficult task because we raise a generation in the liberal order. Now we are changing into a neoliberal plus security order, which is we have no idea what it is like. That is a problem. And I would like to focus on the more hybrid warfare of Russia is doing. Russia is doing this so practically and so smartly. The Brexit, if you ask me, is one of the essence of it. It's a division and breaking out the solution of the North Pact of the Europe from the UK, for taking out from the EU, is a Russian operation and a good operation. It was also proven out. And the US elections, Cambridge Analytica, you mostly remember, and it is more before it, it's proven that there is some Russian interference in the system, and we have a hard time to talk about it. They're not working in the, I mean, the hybrid warfare could possibly weaponize everything you think it could not be used. Anything. And this is related with the mind and the heart issue. It's not related about the weapons you use, because the battlefield victory is not in the battlefield anymore. The battlefield is the society. Battlefield is your population, and you are tested your energy with that kind of issue. So the first thing that Russia is trying to do is the erode cohesion. That they try to do it, because now the EU, as you know, after the increasing of the NATO participant to the 5% of the economically, now the EU countries which is investing normative libertarian approach has to make an investment over the more military expenditure, right? This is really important. And when it goes, it changed the social state order in Europe. And when it changed, so now we need to be here about amplification of the migration policies, how migrants are going to be a problematic in the society. We will talk about the energy costs, which is, we are talking about now Northern Europe is going to be in a cold age. Climate change experts are insistently underlying this point. So energy cost is going to be another issue. So all this rhetoric is going to help support of the populism, and this populism is going to create political polarization. Political polarization is going to be, they have different voices. I mean, when I talk about the hacking, people always say, hacking so tech. Not at all. It is so easy, actually. You can change small things and convince people, persuade people to do different, look from different perspective. And if we have two people thinking the same idea, now we have a cohesion. And if two people we are thinking in a different directions, you might say, oh, okay, we have different approaches, so it is so innovative and creative chaos there. Yes, but if there is no security problem. When there is a security problem, chaos becomes to be you are in the track of perception. The second, there is an alliance trust erosion. Now the countries in EU and expansion of EU becomes an issue. And different states with different intensities are evolving into the process. They are still intimidated. And this also comes to be the defense issue. Who are going to be supportively go with the defense of the EU? Are we going to talk about the asymmetries? Some countries are involving high, some countries already have economic problems. I don't know if you know, the US has as the starting point of the conference or the meeting, and we talk about the US isolation from the European system. But the military defense industry, almost 50% of the EU defense industry comes from the US companies. And Pentagon now pushing, no, yes, we are isolated, but you still have to continue to buy the weapons from EU. United States. So this is really tragic, and so this creates an ambiguity and a fear among the people and the decision makers of the EU as well. And this is always in the context of Russia. No one is reading defenses. I mean, if you look at the recent military exercise of NATO, this is main focus is target is Russia, we know it. And the narrative saturation. Now, we have a war fatigue. Not only Ukraine, but all countries. You can insistively increase emotional talking about the war this day, tomorrow, and the other day, and there's a psychological habit. We call it habituation. It becomes ordinary. Nobody talks about Gaza anymore, right? Have you heard? Nobody talks about. I mean, if you start to talk about Ukraine 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, and it becomes an habituation. So the alertness level should have to be manipulated very easily, but when you talk to war so much among the people, it is not. So we cannot, it comes to a point that the people say Ukraine cannot win. Why? Because the extension of the conflict also pursued from another side, the people. And the second thing is degrade capability. Infrastructural warfare is already in front of us. I mean, 2014 NotPetya attack to Ukraine now has been testing the whole capability of the European infrastructure. Nuclear power plants, energy power plants, transportation, banking, Russian state actors or GRU members, extensions are testing this capability each day. Since we are mostly interested with the kinetic warfare, we are not looking the cyber warfare, and it is always and each day looking for any exploit, any zero-day vulnerability that they can test our capacity. And this is problematic because critical infrastructure sabotage is what makes you to stop everything. And it also creates distrust between the society and the governance. This is really problematic. I would like to recall you blackout in Spain, how it is going to be dramatically expanded to Europe because of basically we call cascading effect of these kind of shortages. And this is really affecting us, my way of the things in sense of energy, rail logistics, which is possibly out of the strikes in Germany, and undersea cables. Russians are insistively exploiting the undersea cables. I mean, you might think, what could happen? I mean, what could happen if you have a chance to be interfere between the Tokyo stock market, nanosecond, to the London stock market, you will be rich. That is the one point. The second, all our digital systems are communicating by the undersea cables. And if we don't have a communication, we cannot move, we cannot mobilize, we cannot take a position. Remember the hospitals and pandemics, and if you block out a hospital without no communication, this is really problematic. And they are deliberately targeting logistic networks. Logistic networks is the choke points and the important points for the Europe continuity, and they are testing these capabilities each day. And the last thing, but also important, defense contractors. Now, EU start to invest on the defense contractors, and it is not located in one center, and their communication is so under the espionage of the system. The Estonia has recently published an intelligence and sabotage regarding to Russian experts. Denmark also has published a report about it. And all these reports show that there is an intensive intelligence report and activity going on in Europe against the defense sector because it has to be stopped somehow. So the goal here is reducing operational reliability. if we can somehow shake this reliability, so it is going to be a possibly in the long term of a war, it's going to be a problem. And another thing, economic pressure. What we know from the techno-nationalism and the investments on the defense, you can invest the defense, but it has a limit. In the one day, if you not arrange the system of the liquidity and the continuity of the system, you will crash onto the wall of economics, because you have to create a flywheel between defense and the civic investments and the continuation of the technology. There are few countries who could do this possibly, and some countries are not very good about it. So when you start invest on defense, you have to know about how you are going to manage this, and this is one of the problem. The other defense issue, the grain issue that comes from Ukraine. And the food security is on the table, and nobody is talking it. And it is really important that the Ukrainian presence is important for the EU in one sense. Also, the change of the climate is all touching us in a one different perspective. So we have to make to understand the Ukrainian issue as a supplement or important issue. And these risks also increase the insurance costs. And most of the people are not talking about insurance costs. But if the insurance costs start to be going up and logistic costs are going to be up, so it will going to affect the market, that the people who are buying something, and it turns into inflation. And inflation becomes to be disturbance among the society. I mean, the basic thing, I'm going to give an example from the Germany again, the prices of the doner that they're buying on the market. This is a real issue. You think that, oh, why, the doner? Yeah, it is a real issue. The time it cost 3 euros to jump to 6 euros, 8 euros. And this really changed the food issue of the regular citizen on the market or on the street. And they start to talk and discuss this. And this is, when you talk about it, you're talking about not only in the economically well countries, we are talking about also countries which are in the economic stress as well, and this is really problematic. More uncertainty, more fiscal stress, more political polarization. That is the triangle that we create in our system. And the third one is the shape settlement. The hybrid warfare, not about the wartime disruption, it's about influencing the structure of the post-war order. They don't want to change the Ukrainian war-related issue. They want to change the way of thinking and the motivation and the moving of the EU in the long term. That is the strategic goal. And to shape the architecture of the European security without direct confrontation. That is how I'm reading the Ukraine. I mean, if Ukraine is there and not, so it is a problem of the EU, because without creating a war, the European mentality, security architecture will change by Russia via the war of the Ukraine. And it is going to become in the end to compress the Ukrainians' bargaining space, if you like or dislike, because if you're under the stress and if you're assisting Ukraine, and then you start to talk about some other problems. And as we see from the electricity and the Ukraine by itself, it is a suffer from the infrastructure exhaustion as well. So it is not only military ammunition, military support, but also other support is required for Ukraine, and expertise is important. Economic collapse also issue, because the war and continuity of war affecting the country's economics. And negotiation flexibility goes with line with all these sectors, and it's a part of it. So this pressure, the European capitals. Personally Brussels, but the others as well. And the voters become anxious. And they started to talk about economic strain. And now the leaders has to start about ceasefire. Ceasefire, which is going to be, we are depending only the only power broker, United States. Now we have to talk about another power broker who has, or some other power brokers who has to sit on the table and so seriously talk what Russia should to do. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Russian and European history, they are relatives. There's a certain kinship between the Russian dynasty and the economic and the EU's dynasties and the power makers as well. So normalize the sphere of the influence is hybrid instability. That's what Russia is trying to do. There is either going to be de facto territorial change or limited guarantees. We are going to see how it is going to do. But Russia is returning EU into a gray zone. which is not only Ukraine a war battlefield, but turning EU into a gray zone. They can do different maneuvers, what they could do. It's a psychological ground for transnational geopolitics. They understand and they read from this perspective. If you think that we know Russia, I will strongly advise you to read the Soviet Union's Middle East policy of Russia and also other Soviet Unions as well. I mean, they have a certain expertise about the EU, they have a certain expertise about the Middle East and the Gulf area. And like we talk about the possible Iranian war, that is also going to be open a front for Iran, and it's going to be a front for Russia, and that is going to be not make it happier, but more aggressive about their operations. So Russia is not trying to defeat EU. What they are going to do, prevent Europe becoming strategically coherent, making stumbling and lacking, and turning geopolitical uncertainty into political fragmentation. I mean, it seems to be, it's already there. This is not there. If you are politically fragmented, you cannot move ahead. I mean, that is always I said, when you lose your social cohesion, you could not decide on a certain subject to make a break. That is really important. So there is a certain entropy. I'm going to end this. If Europe is going to be resisted this entropy or not, because this is the thing which is going to be decide the end of a conflict between the war between Ukraine and Russia. Thank you.
Thank you, Salih, for detailing a number of aspects of the war, especially the gray zone and hybrid attacks, reminding us that resilience and societal resilience is very important in this day and age. Let's take a 10-minute break so everyone can get some tea, coffee, and then we'll meet back here in 10 minutes to continue with the Q&A.
Ses kontrol. Sound check deneme 1-2. Mikrofonların salona ses vermiyor ama kayıt için onu ağzınızdan çok uzaklaştırmadan konuşursak kayda daha düzgün. Şöyle koyayım hatta çıkartmaya uğraşmayın hiç. Tamam.
Okay, we have Stefano and Hennadiy. Are you also there? Okay. Just wait for the consul to take his seat. Okay. Let's get started then with the discussion section of this panel discussion. I will kind of lead us off with a few questions for our panel, and then how we're going to structure it is that I think we can open the floor for maybe 2 or 3 questions at a time from the audience, and then we can kind of go around to each of the speakers and then kind of turn back to more questions and see how many rounds of questions we can collect throughout the next hour or so. So yeah, we have about 1 hour to do the Q&A. So, I mean, anyone who's prepared for a question, we have one of our lovely interns to pass you the microphone. And I mean, we can kind of start with whoever has the question directed toward them. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, Ricardo. I knew it would start us off. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. My question would be, I don't know, for whoever would like to pick it up, how do you interpret the fact that the peace talks are not taking place in Istanbul anymore? Is it Turkey somehow aligning more with Ukraine that it did in the past? Like, sort of, is there, you know, what is the rationale behind, according to you, Turkey aligning more with sort of the Western camp somehow? Because we knew Turkey, I mean, has always played its middle role, which was beneficial until some point, but probably something is changing in that direction. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question to start us off with. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? Sir, with green sweatshirt.
Yeah, thanks for organizing this great event. Actually, I would like to ask about, first I need to do a little bit introduction. Like, Sanee Takeichi won a major election in Japan, and she seems a little bit hawkish for many. And also she has some remarks on on Taiwan as well, and Xi Jinping entering his third term in 2027, so who ended the second term rule. And on the other hand, Washington has its problem with the midterm election as well. So we see a little bit unsure situation, and I would like to ask if there will be a conflict in Taiwan, because that might be a point for Beijing to decide on that. How will it affect the Russian-Ukraine war? It's just a prediction. Maybe especially Stefano, Professor Stefano Braghiroli will answer that. Thank you.
Sorry, could you also introduce yourself? Sorry, the first question was from Ricardo, I know.
Sorry, my name is Burç. I'm a master's student in Berlin-Humboldt University.
Okay, yeah. Perfect, thank you. And then Matt had a question.
Hi, good morning. Is this on? Yeah. Good morning. My name is Matt Bueller. I'm chair of the Middle East Studies program at the University of Tennessee. I'm a 2026 Rotary Peace Fellow. My question is, before Turkey joined NATO, there was a lot of fear about Russian expansionism in the Black Sea region, in Turkey in general. In the 19th century, there were a series of wars between the Ottoman Empire and the Tsar state at that time. And I guess my question is, and of course this is a little bit speculative, why is there not more fear in Turkey about Russian aggression, basically?
Then I guess let's perhaps best go in the order in which we spoke the first time. So Mr. Maksak, then Stefano, and then Salih Hoxha. So if you would like to comment on any of those questions, or I mean, perhaps if you have any comments on, of course, what the other speakers brought to the table during the opening remarks too, then go for it. So Mr. Maksak, you can begin.
Thank you for the question. Basically, prior to answering from the audience, maybe to mark some ideas to the interventions of my fellow panelists from the discussion. The first one, I slightly might disagree with the idea that the European Union shouldn't be at the table of negotiations. Since now, as was pointed by my colleagues, Europe takes the greater burden of supporting Ukraine, be it in terms of financial support, humanitarian support, also military cooperation, I would say it's a must for European Union to find ways and channels to resettle, I would say, the negotiation platform and to be there at the negotiation table. Because otherwise, the decision might look different from perspective of those who take part in that, and basically not all the interests of European partners might be involved in the decision. This is point number one. Point number two, I think that what we discussed as geopolitical shifts in the region and also in the world means a lot for the revisiting the strategy of strategic autonomy of European Union, and here Ukraine is also part of this decision. Let me mention one fact which is very important for us to bear in mind for all of us. Russia didn't manage to conquer Ukraine in 3 days on 2 weeks, and it was also on the slogans, because it underestimated the number of people with combat experience in Ukraine. At that time, the army of Ukraine was more than 200,000 people of active servicemen, be it army and law enforcement agencies, plus 500,000 veterans of anti-terroristic operation on Donbas area with combat experience. So you can figure out that was a big number, and those people were the first to be back to the army when the aggression unfolded. Unfortunately, this is not the story of the European Union capabilities in human dimension. And basically, I think this combat experience is something which is a big deficit. So I think that the future concept of this architecture might be that Ukraine, as a part of European Union, European community, might be one of the cornerstones of future security architecture. Regarding Istanbul talks, from Ukrainian official perspective, it was very good start or restart, because if you went back to March 2022, it was a totally different story, which was not about negotiations. It was just trying to play the time from Ukrainian side, and basically the conditions were not fit for any kind of stable peace. But back in 2025, I think the Istanbul platform was quite prominent, and it was made also in official statements of presidents. But I would say that now it's not a stable place, and it's still like fluctuating and trying the different formats and different places. So in my perspective, if negotiations go the way when some tracks might be aligned, might be just separated, in this way Istanbul might be back on the agenda of negotiations, or as a part of the coalition of the willing and part of these initiatives on freedom of navigation. So I think it's not the way that we lost this track, and I think that we still have good memory of this track in 2025. I'm so here.
Can I follow them?
Yes. Great.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the question. I will start with following up to some of the comments made by by the fellow speakers. One point that Salih made about the final goal that Russia has. Here I am completely on the same page. Russia starts with Ukraine, and of course Ukraine is existential to Russia in their understanding of the Russian world, but the overall objective is somehow to undermine, threaten, divide, and make basically unusable Europe, and I would even say the West. Overall, the idea is to dismantle the West. So Ukraine is the first step, it's fundamental to them, but it's not the final destination. And in that sense, I would say that we have evidence of that. They tried during the first Iraq war to kind of distance in part Europe from the United States. Now I think that they took the other way to distance the United States from Europe, and I would say that there they are succeeding quite effectively. The second point on Hennadiy, just to clarify, my point was not that Europe shouldn't be on the table. Europe should certainly be on the table. Because exactly Europe is contributing so much to the whole thing that not having Europe on the table simply does not make sense. And also because in very basic terms, if you're not on the table, you are on the menu. And the point is that, and this is not only about Ukraine, it's about really Europe itself. If we look at the first edition of the 28 points, these were talking about European security, they were talking about European order, in which basically Europe had absolutely no voice. And this is simply a situation which is extremely dangerous for us, not only EU, but broadly speaking Europe, and also the Black Sea region. Now, when it comes to the question that came from the audience, I will primarily devote my time to the one that I'm more familiar with, which is about Taiwan and whether that might become a hot context. I believe that there are higher chances now than before that Taiwan will become a hot spot, simply because, again, if the idea that is taking over is exactly this one of might makes right, and spheres of influences in which others don't interfere, well, somehow the message becomes increasingly clear to China. And the point is that if Russia is not stopped in Ukraine, if the President of the United States, let's say, uses potentially aggressive rhetoric towards an allied territory like Greenland, well, China gets a message. And that message is somehow that if it does something in Taiwan, that won't be fundamentally challenged. But maybe here, let's say, even considering the most recent developments, I want to stress one thing very important to me. I think that the best way to prevent something hot from happening in Taiwan is to signal something to China by teaching a lesson to Russia. My point is that if the West, if, let's say, the world that stands with Ukraine is able to let's say, burn the bear's feed in Ukraine to basically make Russia pay a lot for what it's doing in Ukraine, China gets a message. The problem is that speaking also in terms of territory is much easier to help Ukraine, to support Ukraine, and to have Ukraine pushing Russia back than doing the same for Taiwan. Taiwan is an island, it's fairly isolated, and somehow is much more exposed. There is no direct line of provision, of communication, and of, let's say, delivering support. That is not the case with Ukraine. So my point is that the easiest and cheapest way to reduce threats to Taiwan are basically to give as much support as we can to Ukraine and teach a lesson to Russia. China is listening in one way or another. I think I stop here.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Salih, would you like to follow up?
Well, Ricardo, I think I have no idea, but I know from the last Iranian talks, I mean, I can make a compare and contrast. Not everybody is happy that these kind of negotiations are happening in Turkey. I'm not going to nominate who are they, so I think it's not Turkey's position not to do any more in Turkey, but some other parties prefer to do and continue in other directions, as far as I know. The Taiwan thing, I mean, I'm not an expert of United States, but I can't, well, I see the way the United States trying to do with the showing the muscles and gunboat diplomacy, that kind of approach, the Taiwan is so delicate because of semiconductors. I don't know how much you know about semiconductors, but it's a major issue. Now there is a deficit in RAM production, hard disk production, and so the Taiwan is one of the most important producers in the world. And China even depended on the Taiwan in some certain actors. And for AI, United States is also has started some initiations to take over the control, but to reach the level of the quality of the Taiwan, it takes some more time. So I think that till to that time, as forming the alternative, they will not let anyone to attack the Taiwan, and the Chinese will not never do it, because, I mean, but the technological side, I know that the Western bloc pushing China to go in a different direction, and it affects the other different tectonic moves. For example, DeepSeek. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'm answering the questions from the field that I know, sorry. It is one of the way that I know it. DeepSeek is an AI system which was invented or created by the Chinese. No, the ones that you are chatting every day, Gemini, Claudia, and the other ones, they are using intensively CPU power, right? We call it not CPU, we call it GPU, because another power capacity. And the Chinese one, they use more software capability, less CPU power, because they don't have a capability to obtain much GPUs in the sectors. That is one of the biggest problems. So I think everyone is going to make a deadly tango with Iran and the Taiwan and the Chinese. By the way, in Chinese, I admire the Chinese tactic. They are silently assisting all their adversaries, all possible ways. And they are like, in Iran, we have seen that China has a lot of communication and supporting the Iran and giving some technological devices to the Iran against the US attack, blah, blah. But they're not making any press release about what they are doing. In all cases, we have seen in the Houthis, in Gaza, in all cases, they have a position, but they're not barely underlining this position. So it is a different policy that we have understand. So I think the world should have to be more focused and understand the Chinese digital diplomacy or flexible diplomatic understanding different than the conventional diplomacy understanding of the Western world. I mean, we are in a different field. They are in a different mindset and way of thinking. I don't want to elaborate this here. The Turkey-NATO thing, Russian aggression, I will say only one date, 24th of the November 2015, taking out the Russian air jet. Have you noticed any NATO member in 50 years take out any Russian air jet? Turkey did. Turkey knows Russia very well. I mean, cooperated, we are still cooperating, we are doing business, and they know us, we know them. I mean, this is a historical continuity. I'm not saying it is a very well, a so good relation. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's love affair, but it is continuing. But they know what the Turks could do. I mean, and they can assess it. In 50s context of the Eisenhower-Truman doctrine of that time and what Greece and Turkey understand in the perspective to containing the Russia is not anymore the context. So, and the Turkey is one of the most important, the manpower capacity of the NATO, and the last exercise also has shown and proved its capability. So we know the Russian and we know what they can do. Yes, we are so much making a dance with Russia than other countries, but it is not much more than the Germans. I can easily say it, because they are also each country is making dance with Russia. Finland is making dance with. We know the countering neighboring countries knows their capacity, and I think we know the Russian aggression. We know their capacity, what they could do. We are a little bit. There is a one Turkish saying. It's hard to translate it, but sütten ağzı yanan yoğurdu üfleyerek yer. So our mouth has been covered with the hotness of the milk. So we are blowing when we are drinking, when we are eating the yogurt. So that is the case. I mean, that's what I see. So we are a little bit, and we try to keep a balance. Turkey has a lot of risks. Like Iran is going to be a risk for Turkey. And we are not showing anything, but as it was in the first Gulf War, Iraqi attack, first Gulf operation is a risk for Turkey, and the second war is also risk for Turkey. So these kind of contextual changes so affect the Turkey. It seems it's not talking and thinking, but it is highly thinking, discussing political decision makers level, I assume.
Sure, we'll start. We start with the Consul General question.
Thank you very much. Sorry. I would like to have a short intervention to your question regarding the Turkey as a platform for further negotiations with the Russians. Actually, I remember very well March 29, 2022, just 1 month after the Russian invasion, when we had the negotiations here in Istanbul, and Turkey plays a very effective mediation role. As well as last year, we had 3 rounds negotiations here in Istanbul with Russians, and Turkish negotiation role was very effective as well last year. As President Zelensky stated many times, that the place doesn't matter for Ukrainians. This is not the priority for our country. The priority for our country is the result which can be achieved after these negotiations. President Zelensky also was ready. There was some offer from Hungarian part to have negotiations in Budapest. Well, symbolically for Ukraine, it wouldn't be very good idea to have negotiations in Budapest, because we all remember the Budapest Memorandum, which was signed in 1994, when Ukraine refused from its the third largest nuclear potential. But even despite that fact, we were ready to have negotiations in Hungary. Also last year, Putin stated that he would be ready to have negotiations with President Zelensky in Turkey and in Istanbul. President Zelensky replied, yes, I'm ready to travel to Istanbul and I will be there. After that, President Zelensky traveled to, well, not to Istanbul, but to Ankara, and Putin rejected. It was even not a game, but it was, you know, Russians. Stefano, thank you very much. You mentioned in your speech absolutely correctly that Russians do not need negotiations as it is. They are not interested in that. They would like to have to seize all the country, all Ukraine. That is the goal of Russians, and they are just taking time, having these rounds of negotiations, showing to the international society that they we would be ready for some peaceful agreement. But no, this is not. This is the game from the Russians. I thank you.
Shall I go ahead? Well, my name is Barçın İnanç. I'm a journalist, and thank you very much for this occasion. I would like to address a couple of questions to our esteemed panelists from Ukraine, especially on the Black Sea. Does Ukraine have any problem with the way the Montreux Convention is being implemented by Turkey? Because you've been talking about freedom navigation, etc. As you might know, Turkey implements it in a very sui generis way. Not only does it block it, the entry to the straits, the Russian and Ukrainian Navy, but the warring parties, but it has also asked its Western allies not to send military ships as well. So I am wondering whether Ukraine is fine with that type of implementation of the Montreux Convention. The second question is, supposing that we might have a ceasefire and a peace deal, would Ukraine want restoration of the normal implementation of the Montreux Convention? That means to go back to where it was before 24 February 2022? Or will it want this current implementation to continue to see whether the ceasefire holds, etc., etc.? Because when you talk about the unity of the littoral states in the Black Sea against Russia, I kind of feel that the Turkish side sometimes get a little bit allergic, because I guess it doesn't want the interference of too many actors in the Black Sea. So that would be my question. And the third one, what do you think about the situation, the latest situation on the shadow fleet? Do you believe that necessary measures have been taken lately in order to curb it, or are there more to be done, and would you expect more from countries like Turkey or other countries? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barçın, for bringing the Montreux Convention back into the debate. Are there any other questions before we turn back to the speakers, or you hear me ask all of my questions?
Hello. Thank you for this great opportunity. I am Nadim Bustani. I am a lawyer from Lebanon. So my question is, the Ukrainian cause has been a polarizing issue in the world politics between the extreme right and the neoliberals, whereby it is noticed that this latter camp is more supportive to Ukraine. However, on the other hand, some reports identify that Israel is engaged in military cooperation with Ukraine. So my question is, how will any potential war on the Iranian regime will be detrimental to the Ukrainian ability to balance between the opposing factions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question in this round? Okay, then I will also add my questions here as the third person. I have a question mostly for Professor Braghiroli about what actually he thinks are the tangible cards for. Oh, can you hear me right now? Okay, could you not hear any of the questions, or could you just not hear the last question?
We missed the previous one.
Okay.
It wasn't too clear.
Okay, the question about Iran. So
yes.
Would you like to, I mean, basically from what I understand, how will any conflict in Iran affect the war in Ukraine, or, I mean, well, vice versa. So would you like to add anything more to that? Okay, so, okay. So now that you can hear us, Stefano, what do you think are the cards that Europe has in its hand? I mean, when I first hear your comment about that, I immediately think of the Russian assets debate, but aside from that, what other cards could we have? Is that still a card, in your opinion, that the West can play sort of against Russia? And then for Mr. Maksak, I know you have some reports about European-Ukrainian defense cooperation. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that, what you see. I mean, of course, we have the safe mechanism in play with the European Union. And of course, in Turkey, we have our own debates about that. But sort of how does Ukraine see this cooperation moving forward? What are the most kind of tangible points for that? And yeah, I mean, I guess we'll reverse the order now. Salih, if you would like to go first to sort of respond to the questions, and then we'll go to Stefano and then Hennadiy.
I think I have only one question to answer because Barchin asked the Ukrainian side, so I will be liberated from those. And I'm not sure about Israel's engagement with the Ukrainians. That is one of the complaints from the early days of the conflict. I know I'm not reading from Ukrainian side, so I don't want to be stoned from it. But I read from the Israeli side because there is a remarkable Jewish presence in Ukraine as a population, and there is a good relation. But what I know from Israel's side, Israel is another country which very well knows the capacity of the Russians. And even the Syrian case, they never try to be the make angry of the Russians because they know the Russians. I mean, I can tell you many examples from the Jabotinsky to others. I don't want to talk about that one. So the Ukrainian, if they attack to Iran, what I see, it's going to be open a second front for the Russians. Because Russians and Chinese there is a quite remarkable air traffic going from Moscow and China to the Iran. We are following it. We don't know what they're carrying, but it is at least 4 or 5 tours has been completed from Moscow. And it is going to be a fact because Shadid, which they use against the Ukrainians, they have innovated it with jet propulsion engine, and they are using it in a different way. So the contribution of Iranian to supporting Russian is remarkable. So we are expecting that is going to be remarkable on the Iranian side. For that reason, it's going to be a second front they have to care and tactically support it. And this might be easiest the side of the Ukrainians because that might be politically and an issue, and secondly is militarily a tactical issue. For Israel, I mean, Israel is thinking the issue is a different perspective. I don't know Israel's specific Ukrainian policy is there and they do it. I couldn't say anything about it. Thank you.
And then we'll go to Stefano.
Yes, thanks a lot. Just one thing to clarify, because again, also your question wasn't, I mean, I didn't get it complete. So it was about how the EU can overcome the current stalemate when it comes to the 90 billions.
I mean, if you want to address the Russian assets, but just generally, I mean, generally, generally, what cards do you think Europe holds in the negotiations? Of course, Europe isn't at the table really right now, aside from, I mean, of course, we are all, I guess, I mean, at least I can say I was impressed at least that they got together for the coalition of the willing, but then where do we go from there? What cards does Europe actually hold? If
Sorry, all clear. And then I will also touch upon this. But yeah, I think that nowadays, again, the main cards that Europe has is basically that Ukraine is primarily sustained by Europe. Europe is the lifeline at the moment for Ukraine. And I would say that this is a good thing in a sense that if we look at the two sides of the Atlantic, which have been traditionally the main pillars of support for Ukraine, I would say that as the situation stands now, Europe, with all the minuses that it has, is much more committed to Ukraine's side than the United States. The United States might want to present themselves as, let's say, a fair negotiator, but clearly do not hide the fact that they do not want to side too openly with Ukraine. This, I think, is quite clear to everyone. What cards Europe doesn't have? I think that the biggest problem of Europe at the moment is that despite a clear vision of what has to be done, there is no 100% consistency. And in a way, there are internal divisions. I would say that some of the divisions are more, let's say, on how to reach the same goal. At the same time, there are visible issues inside that very much undermine the overall action. I mean, obviously, again, we can easily mention Hungary, we can mention to some extent Slovakia, which are making the decision-making machine complicated. Now, how do we overcome the current stalemate? I mean, I would say that the easiest option, most likely, is going to be that 25 countries decide outside of the joint EU budget. This would be, let's say, something that makes decisions faster. The minus, on the other hand, is that this becomes a much more fluid and flexible coalition of the willing style setting, which has much less guarantees that a common EU decision. I would say in the long term, my understanding is that, you know, I've been studying European integration for quite some time. When exposed to key fundamental existential challenges, Europe so far has been able to take decisions even outside of the box. I think that the last time in which that happened was during COVID-19, and obviously, again, in the context of what we are talking now, in supporting Ukraine and doing things that before 2022 would have been unthinkable. So my understanding is that there is a lot of discussion within the European circles on how to make Europe more consistent on decisions and more effective when these decisions are taken, exactly because this for Europe is existential. And I want to stress that. The last point on the shadow fleet, at least when it comes again to what EU and European countries have been doing, I mean, clearly, in terms of voice, there has been a growing attention on that. There have been signals from individual member states that actions will be taken, and some steps were taken. France, for example, recently blocked one ship of the shadow fleet. Certainly the scale is not big enough, but I would signal that when it comes at least to the Northern European and, you know, Nordic Baltic countries, there is a growing coordination also within the framework of the British-led Joint Expeditionary Force. And of course, should the 20th package of sanctions be approved, that of course would go directly to potentially hit the shadow fleet, exactly because it would be also about provision of services in EU ports. And I think I stop here.
Thank you. If you'd like to continue, Mr. Maksak.
So I presume it's my turn, right?
Yeah. Yes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Very good questions. I must admit about Montreal Convention. I would say let's have like 2 steps back prior to February 2022. And at that time, Russia had around 80 warships in Black Sea and 200 support vessels. Prior to full-scale aggression, it's announced AAAD zones for military drills, just blocking some slices of maritime domain. And basically, in that pre-time, it also transferred 3 or 4, maybe I don't know the exact number, of big land ships to Black Sea, which participated directly in full-scale aggression on Ukrainian coast. So basically, what Turkey did with blocking the passage is something which helped us enormously in that day. And basically, we know from our Turkish partners that Russia addressed several times, or a dozen times, Turkish authorities about how to open this access to Black Sea. So I think it was quite a strategic movement, and we appreciate this move from our Turkish partners. For ceasefire and the procedure, as our Consulate General said, that basically there is no will of Russia to somehow engage proactively and meaningfully in discussion. So I think what is quite important here, what we hear from Ukrainian negotiation team and also from our European partners, this ceasefire should be buttressed up with security guarantees. And if the security guarantees have some instruments which also are used as deterrents and capabilities in case, so I would say it might be also a kind of prerequisite for revisiting the procedure of passage of the straits under Montreux Convention. So I think ceasefire is not the time to revisit. Also, we understand the situation with our European partners, which are part of the alliance, and which are also somehow limited in access of the basin. But I think, knowing the capabilities of Russia in other fleets, which also waited in Mediterranean to go to Black Sea, it is at the moment one of the strategic points of deterrence from our partner side. About Black Sea, about Shadow Fleet, I think that the problem is still there. And when you listen to Ukrainian official position, and basically as an expert, I share it. 1 or 2 points are devoted to military domain, 1 point is devoted to sanctions and limiting of Shadow Fleet and just cutting off the financial support for Russian war machine. And Shadow Fleet is still a big problem. Some issues are already done in Black Sea, in Baltic Sea, but you know, it's not enough. We definitely want more from our partners to be engaged on sanctioning and limiting the capacity of the Shadow Fleet. Some parts are there in 20th package of sanctions, which is now still on consideration of the European Union, but I'm positive on these developments. And its adoption, despite some ideas from Slovakia and Hungary. And I think it's very important to have a coalition here, and basically to work proactively both from European partner side and from Turkey as well. So I think here we still see more room for enhancements of our joint actions against Russia. About defense capabilities, about defense cooperation between European Union and Ukraine, I would say we have also positive track here. You mentioned program SAFE, which is not the only one, but the biggest so far. And basically the first stage of this program shows case that many European partners want to participate, because it's two-way street. As I mentioned about human resources and about soldiers with combat experience, the same goes with technologies. And basically, there was a question about NATO and Russia. You saw this article in Wall Street Journal arguing that the NATO drills were totally destroyed by one small unit of Ukrainian soldiers with UAVs, which could spot you at any moment and then in matter of hours just to destroy all your material. So I think this is something we should be aware of the fact. And basically, when cooperating with Ukraine, at this moment, our partners look thoroughly about our potential in innovative systems we have at the moment. And Ukrainian program, which is called Build with Ukraine, means that Ukraine opens possibilities for our partners to produce Ukrainian weaponry, Ukrainian arms on the territories of other countries, for the interest of Ukraine at this moment, but afterwards for opening cooperation after war in many possible other ways with other regions. So I think this is also what is on the table with our partners, with Germany, with Denmark, with Estonia as well. So I think here we also can look deeply with Turkey, because Ukraine is interested in creating such innovation hubs in other places, and I know that Turkey is also part of this consideration. So I think that we are cooperating, but at the same time we're trying to be as much as possible autonomous, because as you know, for Ukraine it's strategically important not to be totally dependent on our partners. Sometimes it's just backfires, as we know with United States, as with strategic enablers which Europe lacking at the moment. So at this moment, roughly 40–50% of ammunition and material is produced in Ukraine, which is also something our partners should look into, because when you understand what the complexities of this war, of this stage, it might also give you some hints about how to develop your own capabilities. But I will reiterate here the point I meant at the beginning, that no single country could withstand full-scale aggression as we at the moment. So I think partnerships is something that we should look into the future with European Union, but also with our partners like Turkey. Yeah, so.
I would like to add also regarding the Russian shadow fleet. Thank you, our panelists. They had an absolutely correct point of view on that problem. But if we look at the nature of the Russian aggression, doesn't matter. This is with regard to towards Ukraine or any other country. The nature of Russian aggression is the possibility to finance this any kind of aggression from Russian Federation. They have this possibility to finance aggression due to because the Russian budget consists up to 70% of funds from exporting natural gas and natural oil. If we cut these possibilities, Russia will not have the power to continue the invasion and the aggression. Well, okay, they could have some aggression, they could continue the war, but the power of this conflict will become lower and lower. Our task is to cut all possible and by the way, actually, I would like to add also that due to Geneva Conventions on War Times, any target, Russia, any target which actually any object which provides the possibility for the aggressor to continue the aggression is absolutely legal target for the country which defends itself. So we consider that Russian shadow fleet helps Russia to continue this aggressive war against Ukraine. That's why this is absolutely legal target for our country to attack this shadow fleet. Also, regarding the question about Montreal Convention, I would like just to appreciate the Turkish position because during the very first days of the Russian aggression, Turkey made its very smart and very we consider very good decision. So they closed Bosphorus Strait for the Russian warships because Russia has also Russia has a big navy fleet, not only in the Black Sea. They had the group of warships in the Mediterranean. They have the group of warships in the Atlantic Ocean, in the Northern Ocean. So definitely it helped us to I would say to win this sea battle because you may know that Ukraine. We consider that we won this sea battle even despite the fact that we don't have a navy fleet. So we used our creativity, we used our sea drones, and it helped us to push Russian navy from the western part of the Black Sea to the eastern part. So thank you.
Yes, that's a great point. And of course, Ukraine's ingenuity throughout the conflict. I think we did not forget the Snake Island incident with the Ukrainian Navy just absolutely destroying the Russian fleet there. Are there any other questions in the audience? We have about 10 minutes or so. We'll start with Ali.
Thank you. May I ask a question to Consul General? Or yeah. I'm sorry, yeah. If I can ask you a question about the comment you made. Do you think Turkey's LNG regasification and storage capacity, which ranks second in Europe after Spain, can it help the can it help reduce the dependence on the Russian natural gas usage? No, for like Turkey's storage and regasification capacity, can it help reduce the usage of the Russian natural gas in EU, in European Union?
Well, any kind of activities from our partners will help us to win this war, first of all, and to make what we need. We need to make Russia weaker. This is not just toward Ukraine. This is toward any other potential victims, because this aggressive Ukraine is the first object in their willings because they would like to control not only Ukraine but all the Europe. And if we can make Russia weaker in any possible sector, so it will help us to win this war. Regarding the gas storage capacities in Turkey or in Ukraine, well, in Ukraine we have a very big gas storages in the western part of the country. We use them for the internal, also for the export of the natural gas. Unfortunately, Russians attacked these gas storages and definitely, of course, we had some problems with gas supply in our internal market. You mentioned about the Turkish LNG. Yes. As many varieties of gas to supply gas we have, it will help Ukraine.
Certainly. All right. Are there any other questions in the room? All right, then let's go through our panelists one more time. If you have any other closing remarks, or if you'd like to address any questions about Ukraine's energy infrastructure, the import of Russian gas, if you have any sort of policy suggestions for Europe, Turkey, the world, then of course feel free to address that and whatever else. So, Salih, since you're laughing, you can go first. So with that. I don't have anything. Okay, so, all right, Professor Braghiroli. Okay, Mr. Maksak.
I think I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. All right, then let us close out the session for today. If there are no further questions, thank you all for joining us in this very lively discussion, for your opening remarks from our panelists, and for taking our audience's questions. Certainly, we can garner from that discussion that everything is sort of up in the air. We've seen this for the past several years, not only in Ukraine, but in terms of global politics, the Indo-Pacific, the Middle East. So how these conflicts converge and diverge, of course, are a testament to time. And yes, we, of course, will continue watching the peace negotiations in Istanbul, in the United States, wherever they take place. Hopefully they will bring peace to Ukraine and a fair and lasting outcome, most importantly. So thank you to our audience again for coming, and thank you to your speakers. And we hope to remain in touch in the future. Thank you so much, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.